Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Coach Kevin here, and we're doing our daily law of attraction training and study together. Glad to have you with us this morning. Going to go ahead and just hop right into screen share here and share a few things with you. Okay. First thing I'd like to share with you is we have a Facebook group that is connected with our morning studies together. It's called Daily Law of Attraction Training and Support with Coach Kevin. And you can find us at facebook.com/groups/Daily Law of Attraction Training. So this is where we go ahead and archive the videos of the classes each day. It's also another place where we can interact with each other outside of the 30 minutes or so we have together each morning. So just wanted to share that with you so that you know how to find us. Also, if you're watching this as a recording, how you can go ahead and join us. So just find the group on Facebook, ask to join, and we'll be happy to have you with us. Next thing I want to share with you is what we are actually studying today. We are in a book called The Jackrabbit Factor. Now, The Jackrabbit Factor was written by a good friend of mine, somebody who was actually been a coach and mentor of mine once upon a time back in 2006. She, at the time that I met her, she had already written this particular book. She had been trained by Bob Proctor to be a facilitator and coach for some of his programs, including the Science of Getting Rich. I attended a Science of Getting Rich program in very early 2006, and that had a huge impact on my life. And then I continued on and have had personal training and mentorship from Bob Proctor himself, and have been trained to be a coach for his programs also. And like we all tend to do as we start out that way, we find our own way, and then many times we end up becoming our own individual coaches and offering our own services, which I do now. So just wanted to share that with you real quick. But the book is called The Jackrabbit Factor, okay? The author is Leslie Householder. The reason I'm sharing that with you is because you can go Google that, Google Jackrabbit Factor or the Jackrabbit Factor PDF or free PDF, and there's going to be a couple places that'll pop up where you can download the book. It is in paperback form if you go to Amazon or to Leslie's websites. However, at one point, she and I had a discussion about offering it for free, so she has, and now you can get it for free, thanks to that conversation that we had many years ago. That way, it's actually helped a lot more people get to know her and ended up with a lot more clients and a big following. So anyhow, we are on chapter 4 of this particular book. It's different than others. She has another one called, I know the second tagline, Heavenly Help with Your Money Matter. I'm trying to remember the first part of it. Anyhow, she has one that's more of a how-to. This one is how-to also, but written in story form. This makes it more memorable, and there's names of characters. As you follow along, the names of the characters actually do mean something a lot of the times. And we're on chapter 4, The Fear. As Richard slept by the rock, Felicity and Matthew searched on, over the rocks and roots of the forest floor. They still called for him, but he could no longer hear their voices. The thickness of the woods hid him from their sight, even though he slept only a stone's throw away. Richard, Daddy, Matthew called, then turned to his mother. He asked, Where's Daddy? Why are we in the forest? Felicity didn't know how to answer, so she changed the subject. Matthew, how are you, honey? You doing okay? I'm okay, Mommy, but my feet hurt. He raised a foot as if to show her the evidence. I'm sorry, sweetheart. She squatted down and briskly rubbed his pant leg. Slowly she turned around, shaking her head, talking to herself. She quietly muttered, Which way did he go? How on earth do I find him in here? Can I sit down, Mom? Sure, honey. Let's rest a minute. They sat together on a fallen log, and she closed her eyes to say a silent prayer that everything would be okay. Felicity felt a little better, more assured that they would find Richard all right, but she quickly began second guessing her impressions of peace. And how often do we do that, right? We pray to God, ask for help, and then he gives us that assurance that things are going to be okay, and then we second guess him afterwards. What if I'm wrong? What if he's already given up? What if Matthew sees him first and her imagination began to run wild? What if we're too late? Her body tensed with fear, and she jumped up, startling her little boy, and yelled, Richard! She didn't mean to frighten Matthew, so she quickly adjusted her demeanor. She also decided she needed to go back for help. Hey, I have a good idea. Let's go take your shoes off at home and give your precious little feet a break. Felicity's voice was shaky but falsely cheerful as she tried to hide how worried she felt. It even crackled a bit. But Matthew apparently didn't notice. Scooping her 4-year-old into her arms, she hurried as best as she could back to the farmlands. Her small 5'3" frame struggled under his weight as she tried not to stumble on the uneven ground beneath her feet. Soon they were back in her old kitchen. Taking off his shoes, she said, Oh, sweetie, look at the clock. We're late for your nap. Matthew was tired anyway, and Felicity needed to think. She let him have a drink and tucked him into his toddler bed. Felicity kissed him and then closed his door. With no little eyes watching her, she surrendered to her anxieties and became frantic. She scrambled for the phone, and it fumbled out of her hands and landed under the table. She reached down to pick it up, and having to crawl partially under the table, she pushed against the chair, which became stuck against the table leg and finally fell over. She growled, and her tightly frowning eyebrows raised a little as she tried to see the numbers through the tears pooling in her eyes. Leaving the tip chair on the yellow linoleum where it lay between the table and the faded avocado green couch, Felicity put the phone to her ear and paced the floor in front of the little table. Hello, police? My husband is gone. We really need to find him. How long has he been missing, ma'am? I don't know. Felicity looked in vain for a clock on the wall, or a watch on the counter, or anything to help have some kind of reference. I don't know, maybe an hour? Can I have your name, please? Felicity Goodman. Felicity, is there a reason why you're concerned after only an hour? Well, he was upset. He left without saying anything. He never does that. I just don't know what he's going to, Felicity stammered, realizing that the operator did not feel the panic that she was trying to convey. Please calm down, Mrs. Goodman. Do you have any idea where he might have gone? Her inquiry was obviously a routine statement rather than a question motivated by genuine concern. He went into the woods behind my house. I've started a statement here, but to be honest with you, we cannot file it as an official missing persons report until he has been gone at least 24 hours. 24 hours? What if that's too late? What about, I don't know, isn't there anything you can do? If he were a minor, it would be different, but the policeman on staff can't place a high priority on a case like this because, frankly, most of the time, the person is left of his own free will and will also return on his own before the 24 hours is up. Felicity was speechless. Mrs. Goodman, Felicity didn't know what to say, but didn't want to hang up yet either. Surely she could say something to change the outcome of the phone call. She finally spoke to the dispatcher. Well, what do you suggest I do? I'm afraid he might try something. She couldn't seem to say the word suicide because she didn't want to believe it could really be true. Speaking it out loud to the operator would have taken this nightmare out of her head and straight into reality somehow. It would have seemed so serious. She sort of hoped this whole day was just a bad dream. Felicity, do you have reason to believe he's in danger? Again, her question came out like a statement. Well, yes and no. He's never threatened suicide or anything, but he was so depressed looking and he left without an explanation. Would you like me to send out an officer to talk with you and get the paperwork started, at least? The operator seemed to be demonstrating a little more compassion. Felicity was relieved, albeit not the kind of help she hoped for. She thought it might be comforting to have the officer come anyway. Even a little bit of attention from the authorities would be better than nothing. The emptiness she felt inside was growing at her nerves. It must have been her tendency toward comfort food, as well as the thought of a police officer coming over in a black and white car with lights on top, that instilled a sudden craving for a nice white jelly-filled donut. After giving the operator the needed information, Felicity hung up the phone and stepped over to the window again. She gazed across the farmer's field and into the woods. They seemed so impenetrable from that far away. They looked shadowy and harsh. Where are you, Richard? Where are you? It took the officer about 45 minutes to arrive at her home. As she searched her nearly empty cupboards for something edible to help her feel better. She wasn't the least bit hungry, but eating would calm her nerves. She finally found some graham crackers and prepared to whip up some icing sugar and milk to spread across the top. After clearing the place at the table, she began to put it all together. Her hands shook while she thought so much in detail about the horrible things that Richard was probably experiencing. The depression, the anger, the loneliness, the hopelessness, and the suicide. She envisioned the funeral and how Matthew was going to have to deal with the loss of his father. Felicity absent-mindedly stirring the icing mixture. Her mind wasn't on crackers or icing or even the chair still lying on its side by the couch. After pouring a glass of milk, she dunked a corner of the cracker, swishing it back and forth until the edge of the two sandwich crackers became heavy and soft. Briefly allowing the excess milk to drip off, she lifted the crackers to her lips and consumed most of the soggy clump. A small section that had broken off too soon rolled down her chin and onto her blouse. Leaving it there, she only looked down on it. Then, seeing it as evidence that her life truly was falling apart, her brows furrowed and the tears returned full force. Leaving the rest of the crackers on the table, she picked up the small bowl of icing, dipped her finger in. She walked to the couch and then buried the glob of icing in her mouth. Before she knew it, she had eaten the whole batch. Disgusted, exhausted, and scared, she set the bowl down on the floor and reclined on the couch. She was just curling up in a fetal position when the doorbell rang. She began to jump to her feet as she shouted, "Come in." Losing her balance, she fell off the couch, banging her knee on the fallen chair. Struggling to her feet, she kicked the chair just as the concerned officer and his partner were swinging the door wide open. Felicity's other foot was caught in one of the rungs, and she began to lose her balance. "Lady?" Felicity's hands flew out in front of her, preparing to catch herself in case she was toppled all the way down to the floor. Then waving them backwards full circle like windmills, she finally stabilized herself. Standing erect, she prudently brushed the wrinkles from her blouse, unknowingly leaving the soggy graham cracker stuck to her chest. I was Felicity drew a blank and finally just sighed, resigned to an idiotic first impression. "May we come in?" Recovering, she said, Yes, please come in." Relieved by their long-awaited arrival, Felicity fought back a new release of tears, which she valiantly kept at bay for a few moments. Then failing, she rubbed them away, smearing her cheap mascara as it ran in black streams down her cheeks. The officers watched her, uncertain about what they were getting themselves into. The thin layer of crusty icing around her mouth looked like the remains of a dreadful froth that had all dried up. The senior officer glanced down at the chair, then back at her. Embarrassed, Felicity stepped her foot out from between the chair rungs, kicked it behind her, and motioned for the officers to come in. Senior Officer Cross, remember that name, chose not to call further attention to the disarray. The poor woman was obviously distraught, and he just wanted to get down to business. His junior partner glanced at him, and in response, the senior officer discreetly shook his head with a slow blink, meaning, never mind all this. But before the senior officer proceeded with his duties, he glanced once more at the chair. He was a little surprised that she hadn't merely picked it up. Ma'am, can I get some more information about your husband? Felicity nodded and let him sit at the small kitchen table. She pushed the radio and crackers to one edge so he would have more room to spread out the paperwork. Junior Officer Doolittle remained standing behind Cross, and Felicity sat back on the couch not far from her visitors. Cross, the senior officer, looked intently and directly at her and squinted. He cocked his head to one side. He found it hard to overlook the raccoon eyes. The streaks of tears had turned black with mascara and then dried froth. The dispatcher had briefed him that this was not an urgent case. So why was the poor woman such a wreck? Finally he spoke. Ma'am, how long has he been missing? She sniffed. About 2 hours. She noticed he wasn't looking her in the eyes. Was he looking at her mouth? Self-consciously, Felicity tried to wipe her mouth with the back of her wrist. She gleamed at the young officer with him, who was a little uninterested, eyeing the rest of the milk and ice crackers. Cross leaned back in the chair, and his shoulders relaxed. Ma'am, don't you suppose that he might just be out for a walk? How could she answer that? She was choking back sobs. Trying to speak would have only sounded like the emotional, high-pitched words of a little girl. The patronizing tone of the policeman's words made her feel small. Felicity shook her head slowly, but she didn't say a word. Okay, we may go over today, and if we do, of course, you're allowed to leave because we do have more time, but I'm not sure if we'll get through the full chapter in the time, but I'm going to go through it. So if you need to go at any time, that's fine, or you can stick with me to the end, and also the recording will be in the Facebook group later today. Chapter 5, the instruction. Against the cold, hard rock, Richard continued to doze. In the tree above him slithered a snake that had just caught view of the solitary man below. Slowly and quietly it crept toward a lower branch, then paused. The breeze was cool, but the sun shone through the gap in the trees and kept his body warm. In the meantime, his mind was far away, taking in the strange scenes of the potted road and amber fields. He once again heard his father's voice speak. What do you want? Richard, our minds are powerful tools. Your thoughts are alive and do more than you realize. Don't be careless with your thoughts. Richard suddenly felt like he wasn't alone. He turned, and there stood his father smiling. Dad. The last time Richard had laid eyes on his father was when he was only 12. Unfortunately, those final memories were tainted with the dismal images that accompanied his father's funeral or final battle with cancer. He almost didn't recognize his father standing there, so alive and robust. He appeared to have the strength and health of a young man in his prime. In his younger days, Richard's father had been a brilliant businessman, so Richard had been told anyway. What does that mean to a kid? But because cancer had cut his father's life too short, Richard, with his mother and 17-year-old brother, were left behind. Son, his father smiled and opened his arms. Oh, Dad, Richard melted into his father's arms, just as he had dreamed over and over. When he felt alone or depressed, he often closed his eyes and visualized this very event. Dad, I've missed you so much. You're here. How? Richard exclaimed through breathy sobs. Richie, oh, my little Richie, I've been here with you on occasion, but you couldn't see me. At times, your thoughts drew me close to you, just as the things you desire. That is what I am here to tell you now. You want money? Use your thoughts. You need food? Use your thoughts. Think on the worthy desires of your heart, and they are drawn to you spiritually. What do you mean, Dad? Richard pulled away from his father's embrace, but continued to hold his arms. All physical things have a spiritual counterpart. By thinking, we draw the spiritual counterpart to ourselves. By persisting in right thought, the angels do our bidding and arrange the affairs of men to cause the worthy desires to pass from the spiritual to the physical world. Richard's brows furrowed, and he shook his head slightly. That seems too simple and kind of weird, Dad. I thought lots of things that never came true. As long as you believed it was coming, the dream was actually on its way. All things in the universe that were required to see the dream come true were gathering for your benefit. However, and this is where most men fail, the moment you entertain doubt or fear, all of those forces reverse, and the things, the ideas, the situations, the people you need immediately draw away from you. His father paused and then continued. Our negative thoughts actually and literally cause the blessings to be repelled. If you can picture what you want and believe that it's on its way, by God's law, it must come. Hold on to the belief, and in time, you will realize it. Richard's father panned the area surrounding him and held up his hand as if to display the scenery to his son. The earth is abundant with all that any man could desire, but by his own misuse of thought, he cannot see it. He dropped his hand and then tapped Richard's forehead. Change your thinking, and you will see the opportunities all around you. You've been blind to them, but they are all around you now. Blind to them? Richard thought about the blonde man that couldn't see the sacks. What am I missing? What's all around me now that I can't see? Richard looked around. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, but nothing really stood out. He saw the dilapidated road, the vast fields on each side, the tree line, and thick forest in the distance. He looked back at his father, puzzled. Son, you have to know what you want. If someone else has what you want, learn from them, but you must trust your own instincts to make the right decisions. The voice of inspiration will come only after you have a clear picture in your mind of what you're seeking, and after you allow yourself to feel truly grateful as though you already enjoy the success. This philosophical stuff wasn't making any sense to Richard. It seemed terribly vague and hardly useful. Along this path, many things had been bizarre. This odd conversation was no different, so he did not take it too seriously and simply nodded graciously to his father. Thanks, Dad. Now go, know what you want, and when you find it, chase it. You'll know what to do. Richard blinked and lifted his eyes, nodding as though he was committing the advice to memory. But before he could thank his father again, the kind, wise gentleman disappeared. Richard spun around to see where his father had gone, but he was alone. With a sentimental sigh, he paused and then looked again at the road. What do I want? I want to wake up already. Then with a sigh, he lamented, I want food for my family. I want to go home to my wife and Matthew. He looked down the road in each direction, a little confused because he could not remember from which direction he had come. He saw a few footprints in the dirt where the asphalt had completely worn through. They all were pointed in one direction, so he chose to go the same way. Somewhere off the path, something rustled the tall grass. Richard jumped, startled by the sudden noise. The tall, golden, wheat-like grass swayed in the light breeze, and all was quiet. He, in one spot, maybe 50 feet away, he saw a gap in the grass where something had hid. For an instant, he heard another rustle, and the gap was gone. Actually, that turned out perfect. Did have enough time for that. And the plot thickens here. The plot thickens here. All right. Good morning. See that some of you are still hanging with us right now. And welcome, Crystal. I see that you've now joined us this morning for the first time. Good to see you there. And we've got Rich here. We got Joseph here. And I know we had Valerie a little bit ago. Hey, hey. I know that based on what we read, so Crystal, what I would do if I were you, to know what to do and catch up, let me share my screen really quick, is we are reading a book right now called The Jackrabbit Factor. And the best way to find it is to just Google the Jackrabbit Factor or Jackrabbit Factor PDF, and you'll be able to find a free copy that you can download. It was written by somebody who's been a mentor to me once upon a time back in 2006. And she wrote this particular book and has offered it for free. This is a book that we're studying right now. We've done other books in the past. But to catch up with us and to follow along, we'll be doing chapter 6 and maybe 7 tomorrow. But if you go Google Jackrabbit Factor PDF, free PDF, something like that, it'll be pretty easy to find. The other thing I want to share with you is how you can go into the archives of these classes that we've been doing. If you go find Daily Law of Attraction Training and Support with Coach Kevin, and let's see if this will be easy for me to copy and put into chat really quick. I think so. If you go into chat, you can click on the link right here and find our Facebook group, which is at facebook.com/groups/Daily Law of Attraction Training. So ask to join us and you'll have access to the archives of these. And it's another way for us to communicate with each other outside of the morning training. So I wanted to share that with you really quick so you know how to stay more involved to be caught up. And I know based on what we read today, because this is a story format, a little bit different kind of book than what we've done in the past. So, but any questions or comments based on what we went through today? I don't know that there would be a lot, but if you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask.
So most books that you mentioned, I am actually familiar with. I haven't read this one yet, but look forward to look it up. It's kind of related to the other, deals with the psychological factors of how we moving forward, how we is addressing the subconscious in stories, or have you been reading the book from the very beginning?
I read the book many years ago, and I've probably, since I first knew about the book, which was in early 2006, probably half a dozen times over the years. I had an audio version of it too that Trevin Householder, which is Leslie's husband, he read. So I know it, but as far as the last time I read it, it has to be probably, I don't know, many years ago, maybe 7 or 8 years ago since I've read it. I felt inspired to bring it back up again because of the story. And what it does is you can go back and remember the characters and how they responded and acted and everything, and recognize how it actually applies to our own life. And the reason that different characters are given different names throughout the story, those are symbolic too. Kind of like how Jesus would teach in parables. Everything was kind of symbolic. He shared words, but he also shared symbols that meant something to the people that he was teaching at the time. And I found, actually, when I first read this book years ago, in addition to The Science of Getting Rich, I'd actually read this book before the Science of Getting Rich seminar that she put on, that I went to. And the two of them combined together, I actually used this book actually to be able to afford to attend the seminar. I applied the principles I learned from this book, because I didn't have the money for the seminar at the time, and used those to get me into the Science of Getting Rich seminar. I used the Science of Getting Rich seminar and what I learned and studied there, plus continuing to study. And 4 months after that, I ended up, my income jumped up from $5,000 to $6,000 a month to an average over the next 8 months of 50 grand a month. So yeah, definitely familiar with what's in here. And I really like this book. My kids, when they were younger, my daughter's 24, my son's 22. My daughter actually, once I got a hold of the audio one, she made it her choice to do so. So she would actually go to sleep listening to the audiobook almost every day. My children later on, after doing that, started a business of their own when they were 15 and 17 years old, selling fudge. And we were homeschooling our kids. So part of their curriculum, they wanted to learn entrepreneurship, and they started a business selling fudge and also doing their schooling. And over the next 2 years, they had a profit of 130 grand over 2 years when they were just teenagers. Yeah. But those apply to the principles of how to think. Also, they've been around me because of me spending that time with Robert Kiyosaki and Sharon Lecter. So I also brought them around other entrepreneurs and adult entrepreneurs as well as kid entrepreneurs. But they spent more time around adult entrepreneurs and got to see how they thought, because I ran a entrepreneur group in the Phoenix area, and we'd get together a couple times a month, and my kids would come along with me and participate. So yeah, kind of has become a family affair for us.
That's fantastic. Homeschooling, I imagine that after the COVID, probably more people would be joining in to.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of things that are never going to go back to the way they were. People are going to be used to doing things differently.
That's fantastic accomplishment, and it's just one wonders that, of course, these things are why are not part of teaching in a school. I wonder what degree schools have been beginning to incorporate these teachings, perhaps at some level, to teach children.
Sharon Lecter had a mission, and she was having a tough time, though, accomplishing it. Her mission was to get this into schools, or not the law of attraction stuff, but kind of the rich dad, poor dad stuff. And they did succeed at the Maricopa County level, getting some curriculum into the community colleges for like one class. And it did go on for maybe 2 or 3 years, this one particular class, but didn't make much more headway than that, because especially at a younger level, they were willing to give away the material at like the elementary school level. But the teachers balked at it because it was just more work for them, and they were going to have to understand it so that they could then teach it to the kids. So, we talk about wanting to make change, but the school teachers themselves were like, you know what, now I've got to go learn something else that I don't understand and I feel responsible for. So most of them balked at the idea. So even though it was offered for free, they didn't accept it. And Robert and Sharon kind of had it. Robert Kiyosaki, he kind of thought that's how things were going to go anyway. So Robert and Sharon kind of separated at one point because they wanted to go different directions. And Robert just didn't believe that getting it in the school system was going to work out. Sharon wanted it to work out, but ultimately, at least up until now, it didn't. You know, the bureaucracy and what people are used to.
Right.
Think about if you're a school teacher and you're financially illiterate, and then you're now being asked to teach children how to understand business and entrepreneurship and financial literacy and have that new responsibility to do that. You know, that's they'd have to go learn it themselves first, and then to be able to actually.
Well, wouldn't that benefit them as well?
Oh,
I think
of course, of
if
course.
they would look at it as an incentive for themselves to learn. And my thought is that I think it would be important to kind of work out at what stage would be best to introduce to children, at what classes, at what level perhaps would be more, um, it would have more chance to catch on, from what grade.
I think you can start from about age 10 or so. I mean, they they also had a game called Cash. They have this game called Cash Flow, but they also had one Cash Flow for kids. And my kids played that game and outgrew it before they're age wise, meaning, you know, it said it's for this age to this age, and they were ready to jump into the bigger stuff, you know, earlier than what the age on the box said they'd be ready. It's a matter of getting exposure early enough and the kids having an interest. And I think children do have an interest because they like the idea of money, some of them, but even the ones that don't care as much about having their own money, they like the idea of creating something and running something and feeling like they're in charge of something. So
that's very interesting.
They want to
It's
start
really
their own businesses.
Mhm.
Yeah, and my kids.
That's very interesting. Uh-huh.
Yeah, my kids had a couple smaller businesses, even prior to that one with Fudge that they had done, um, that kind of whetted their appetite for it. But what I thought, you know, it's one of those things where I ask all the time. I put it out there. I'm here to help coach people that want to learn and change their mindset. But as soon as they find out it costs money, but I've never had a client that I've worked with whose income within the next year to 18 months didn't multiply. They didn't receive at least 10 times of what they paid me in a financial return. Every single one of them has received 10 times plus within 12 to 18 months. Some of them receive it a lot faster, but I'm saying that's the time frame. And so somebody goes, well, I don't want to pay you $10,000 to coach me. Well, somebody else paid $10,000 for me to coach them, and they added 100 grand to their income their first 6 months.
What kind of field? What kind of field were they in?
What kind of what?
What kind of work? What kind of work or field?
This one was in real estate. They had wanted to become a real estate investor. They'd been playing around with it for the previous 4 years. The most they'd made with it was about 40 grand in addition to their other profession. And then they jumped up over, well, let's see, on that first 6 months, another 100 grand plus, actually plus. They're probably up by about 130 grand or so over that 6 months. But in addition, then once their money situation got resolved, they actually wanted to work on relationships. And I'm not a relationship coach, but I know the principles of how to manifest. And so we went in that direction. And then over the next several months, he's ended up meeting some great people. And almost, it's kind of like now you watch the movie The Secret. I don't know if you've seen that or not. You know, it's kind of like that guy.
I've seen it several times.
You know, he's like, I want to date X number of people. Okay. It was almost the same thing. It's kind of funny, but now he's found someone that he'd like to take that relationship further, and they've been going out for a while, and looks like marriage might be in the near future. So
sounds good.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And then I've done group coaching stuff too. He did one-on-one group coaching somewhere between 1,200 to $2,500. And people that have participated in that kind of stuff, same thing, great results. Of course, they have to do what they're asked to do. If they don't follow through and do their part, you know, they're not going to have anything happen. But I also found too, most of the time, the people that pay the most money are the most serious about it. And I can teach them and share with them nearly the same thing. But the result a lot of times that they end up with is more based upon what they put into it, because it makes them serious about it. They're like, well, heck, if I pay this, I'm not going to waste, you know, I'm not going to not do the work, and I'm not going to miss my appointments with my coach, and I'm going to do the things that I'm asked to do on a daily basis because I want the results. Most of the time when people do something like what we're doing right now, they show up for a few days and then they disappear. Why? Because it's free. So, you know, there's a lot of times we don't place much value on that which is given to us for nothing. So, but anyhow, that just goes along with when we were talking about the schools, right? That there was no financial incentive other than to learn themselves for the teachers how to be financially literate. Maybe if they would have said, we'll give you a raise if you do this, but the school system wasn't going to give them a raise to go teach financial literacy, because the school system didn't really care about it. It was offered, and it was like, well, if the teachers are willing to do it, okay, but what they got pushback from the teachers, you know, hey, this is just more work you're putting on us. So it didn't work out.
Hopefully people will come to the front who will feel passionate to advance this cause, and just like everywhere else, work needs to be done to get through the obstacles. Maybe the inertia of the past, and eventually I think more people will get inspired, and it will happen at one point.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go for this morning, and we'll be back tomorrow to see you again.
We appreciate it. Thank you.
You guys are very welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Crystal. Thank you guys so much.